Hello and welcome to MVP Hot Seat with Ibrahim Ababu. As Africa intensifies its quest for reliable carbon neutral based load power, the role of specialized consultancy becomes paramount. Moving a nuclear program from a conceptual roadmap to a commissioned plant requires a delicate dance between international standards and local realities. To explore this transition, we are pleased to sit down with Seyi Osuntokun, president of Sonics Services and Consulting LLC, with extensive experience advising on regulatory and technical frameworks essential for nuclear success. Seyi offers a unique perspective on how Africa can avoid the pitfalls of the past to power its future. Welcome, Seyi. Thanks for joining us today.
Yes, good morning, Brian. Thank you very much. A pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to our discussion.
You're most welcome. My first question is kindly introduce yourself and Sonic's work.
Okay, excellent. So again, good morning, everybody. My name is Seyi Osuntokun. I'm happy to be part of this discussion related to the African Nuclear Business Platform. As some of you may be able to tell from my name, I'm a Nigerian background. I have roughly 2 decades of technical and leadership experience in energy, both nuclear power and oil and gas. I have an advanced bachelor's degree in computer science and physics from Dalhousie University in Canada, as well as another bachelor's degree in electrical engineering from Ryerson University in Canada as well. I have some other certificates in academia around business and leadership development from Georgetown University, 𝐓𝐈𝐌𝐄𝐒𝐓𝐀𝐌𝐿𝐉 Leadership Center, 𝐓𝐈𝐌 University, American Management Association, and Colonial University. Spent some time in the corporate realm, have roles obviously in Sonics, which is I'm currently the president of Sonics Services and Consulting, as well as roles at Colonial Pipeline, 𝐓𝐈𝐌, which is now Framatome, Atomic Energy of Canada, which is now Candu Energy / Atkins Realis, Adderall International, which is now Iris Power, and United Wire and Cable. So that's my career roles. Some of my project accomplishments, I was part of the team that successfully upgraded the first analog reactor protection system to a digital system in the US. So we accomplished that under the realm of 𝐓𝐈𝐌, and we worked for Duke Energy, the Akona Nuclear Station Units 1, 2, and 3 for that for that project. So we had a Platts Global Engineering Engineering Project of the Year award for that, as well as the NEI Vision and Leadership and Best of the Best awards for that digital upgrade. Worked in the nuclear power industry in 3 countries, in Canada, Candu projects, the US, PWR and BWR projects, as well as France, PWR projects. And I'm currently supporting digital instrumentation control upgrades and regulatory licensing for the install-based plants in the US, as well as SMRs in Canada, the US, and Poland. So that's a little bit about me. Just a little bit about Sonics. We started providing consulting services in 2014 for digital instrumentation controls projects. And in 2023, we branched out and started providing services and consulting for oil and gas projects, in the oil and gas industry. Key experience includes GE Vernova, PAR, 𝐓𝐈𝐌, Arizona Public Service, Duke Energy, Atomic Energy of Canada, Southern Nuclear, US NRC, Westinghouse, Enercon, and so on. And our specialization is in nuclear safety-related digital I&C engineering, including independent verification and validation, digital I&C licensing and cybersecurity, pipeline, SCADA systems and leak detection systems, measurement systems, simulator and training systems for pipelines. And then common to both, we also do Pi data historian systems, and we're also branching into artificial intelligence, machine learning. So that's a little bit about myself, Seyi, and a little bit about the company Sonics.
Fantastic. Thanks, Seyi. So from your vantage point at Sonics, how do you assess the current momentum of nuclear energy development across Africa?
Okay, that's a really good question. The momentum, from my vantage point, the momentum is really good. It's really interesting, moving from theoretical interest into really active execution. And Africa is a big continent, but not a lot of power, a lot of expertise related to nuclear power. South Africa remains the only country with an active nuclear plant, which is Coburg. And also, Egypt is actively constructing the Aldaba plant by construction by Rosatom, which I think it's operational in about 2028 or so. However, there's a lot of interest in other countries, namely Ghana and Kenya. They've moved quite far along into phase 2 of the IAEA roadmap, so that's really good. Nigeria is still looking at preparatory studies for both large scale and SMR plants. So the current momentum, I think, is really good, and that's just to name a few. There's also interest from Tanzania, Uganda, Zambia, Congo, and Namibia. So that's really good. Other areas as well, I believe Niger, Senegal as well. So momentum is really good, but we really do have to move forward from theoretical discussions into active participation in the nuclear industry. I
Exactly.
think for Africa, one of the biggest shifts is SMRs. That has been the biggest game changer because by shrinking down the plants into a good size, it allows for introduction to the grids, ensuring that there's grid stability. Because the traditional plants have always been large scale plants, anywhere from 800 to I think 1750 megawatts, which is a lot and can cause some instabilities in the grid as you introduce and remove those large power stations from small to medium sized grids in African countries. So those are some of the emerging strategy shifts. Key challenges that I see: high upfront costs. It costs a lot of money to build the plants, not a lot of money to operate based off of fuel prices are low. Operations are medium, but it costs a lot of money to build the plants. Multiple safety systems, lots of reinforced concrete. It's a high upfront cost. And I had mentioned the grid capacity. SMRs is the biggest game changer. So for African grids, that's actually quite good, and it'll support that power rating. So to me, those are some of the current momentum of nuclear energy and development across Africa. It's moving well. It needs to move quicker, but it has to move with the required quality for nuclear power.
Indeed, and totally agree with you. SMRs could be a game changer for many African countries, due, as you
Yes,
mentioned, to the grid capacity, such as, for example, Rwanda are only considering SMRs at the moment and not considering large reactors because of their grid capacity. And other
exactly.
countries you mentioned could be fitting more for SMRs than large reactor. And the momentum is there. It's as you mentioned, many African countries are pursuing. They have the commitment, the political commitment toward nuclear, but a lot need to be done, and hopefully quicker, but at the same time with respect of security and safety measures.
That's correct.
So, a follow-up question to that. Many African countries are moving, as we said, from planning to implementation phases. Where do you see the biggest opportunities for local capacity development today?
Yes, that's another really good question. We when we talk about building plants and major infrastructure projects like nuclear power, we tend to focus on the vendors who are providing the plants and the systems and so on and so forth, which generally are international companies led by the U.S., Russia, France, China, and so on. But that local content, local capacity is definitely needed to basically move past construction into operations. So some of the biggest opportunities that I see is around the local industrial supply chain. How do we utilize local companies, maybe for some of the non-nuclear construction and manufacturing needs for the nuclear power plant? If you think of the steam turbine island versus a nuclear island, that's non-nuclear. How do we engage local partners, supply chains to provide support for those areas of the plant whilst leaving the nuclear steam supply system with the vendors with the know-how? So that is definitely one of the biggest opportunities that I see as gaining local talent and local industry into building these plants. Egypt has done a really good approach with the Aldaba plant, using local talent and local trades and infrastructure, and that should help with with the other African countries as they look at Egypt, how they've progressed through their building of plants, and almost mimic some of that approach. Now, with the local capacity development requires a lot of training. Transitioning to the implementation phase, the focus is obviously more on the practical side of things, the construction, the operations, waste disposal, waste management, and so on. And also transitioning from conventional power, which most of Africa uses conventional power, fossil, coal, hydro, and so on, to nuclear requires a complete overhaul of mindset and culture. And that really has to start now. Nuclear is very special. It's a very special form of energy. And the mindset really has to change as to how to operate, how to manage, how to maintain, how to dispose of waste, and so on. So training is absolutely essential to get that core foundation ready for this new type of power that Africa is embarking on. Massive skills gap associated with moving to nuclear power, but as I keep saying, training is key to basically bridge that gap. It really must start now. Start now with the foundational training of the local content, local capacity, local infrastructure, personnel, resources. Start with the foundational training to get them up to speed on nuclear power, going back to history, past plants, the evolution to the current plants, including the SMRs, and get them to fully understand what it means to deal with nuclear power. Then past that, as you select a plan, you select a vendor, you get into obviously more focused training that the vendors will supply. But there's an opportunity right now to provide a lot of training to get people that foundation that they need to understand nuclear power, to understand the intricacies of nuclear power, benefits, the disadvantages, and so on. And then they can build upon that as countries and utilities start selecting vendors for their own specific technology. So I'll keep saying it: training, resources. It's needed around the world. There are not enough, and we have to develop locally as well as internationally.
Yes, it is extremely important. And
Yeah.
moving on to another very important aspect is the regulatory aspects. So, in your view, what lessons can African countries draw from early movers on the continent, as you mentioned, Egypt or South Africa, when establishing independent nuclear regulatory bodies?
Yes, that is cool, and that's really the core, the soul of the nuclear power program, the regulatory body. How do you regulate the industry? How do you inspect plants? How do you make sure that the plants are keeping their commitments as to how they operate, how they maintain, how they dispose of waste, and so on? So the lessons African countries can draw from the early movers is obviously pay a lot of attention to South African program, which is well established. And then for the newcomers, Egypt is at the forefront because they are constructing plants right now. So early engagement is really key, and respect of the current regulatory bodies, I would say within Egypt and South Africa is key because they bring that African content and that African flair to the regulatory bodies. As is very interesting to say, very much so, most people, most countries, most utilities are looking to procure the reactor before having a robust legal framework, which would be a recipe for challenges. So you have to have your regulatory bodies in place, that framework, to be able to regulate the industry, regulate the utilities, the plants, operations, and so on. And that's probably one of the hardest points, and one of the time-consuming points that may not be the most interesting, but is absolutely necessary. Also, you have to make sure that the body that regulates nuclear power has to be independent from the body that promotes or operates the plant. So there has to be that independent framework between the regulatory bodies and the operations utilities of the plants. They have to be separate. That could be a challenge related to African countries, in my opinion, in the sense that the culture of African countries, or African cultures, is really to be together, to be one. There's a lot of focus on culture. There's a lot of focus on authority. There's a lot of focus on respect. So there has to be that independence, and that's actually tough. While it may be tough for African countries, it's tough everywhere to make sure that you have that independence. At the same time, being able to execute and operate a plant, you have to have a regulator that come in, inspect, that can challenge the plant thinking, and also in dire circumstances, which every country probably faces, potentially shut down the plant and have them make changes such that they can operate safely. At the core of nuclear power is to operate safely, and the regulatory body is the highest, the utmost authority to ensure safe operations of the plant. So that is critical.
Yes.
South Africa, Egypt, Kenya, they offer a good blueprint for crafting regulatory bodies. So that's definitely one area that needs to be paid attention to, and training.
Yes, that's the most important point we'll focus on. And also, you touched on earlier on some of the challenges facing African
Yes.
countries. So, based on your experience, what are the most critical challenges African countries face in the early stages of constructing and operating nuclear power plants?
Yes. So as we said before, I think that the biggest challenge that faces African countries, and really countries around the world, is the financial wall related to the high upfront cost of building nuclear power plants. It's a lot of money, whether it's SMRs, whether it's microreactors, whether it's large, traditional power stations. It costs a lot of money, and you need very good solid financing for it. Even the first world countries struggle with that. I remember in the 2005 nuclear renaissance, when I joined the nuclear industry, the landscape was very different. It was all about memorandums of understanding, loan guarantees from governments, and then the utilities can now start looking at other financing vehicles to construct plants. So it was a long, drawn-out process, but it was a well-established process. Now, the difference is there's a lot of tech funding coming for nuclear power plants because utilities and the grid needs additional power as you go into this AI realm of building data centers and moving to big and fast technology. The financing maybe a little bit less onerous as before, because you have a lot of tech companies who need the power, and they are pairing up with all different types of power sources, including nuclear, to get this power to the grid such that they can consume it in the AI data centers and so on and so forth as we move and industrialize past the current technologies that we have. So financing is the biggest challenge, but maybe not as big as in the past. Looking back at the last nuclear renaissance, as well, human capital is a long game. Resources are definitely one area that there are challenges across the world, whether it's in the U.S., Canada, in Europe, and in Africa as well. So we have to look at the resources now. We have to look at training now, and building a competent nuclear workforce takes a long time, anywhere from 10 to 20 years. So we have to start now. One thing that I see is the ability to train locally, train abundantly, and start training now. In addition to that, I think there's an actual big opportunity. Germany basically shut down the nuclear power industry, and they had a very vibrant and a very excellent nuclear power industry. Plants across the board, different types of plants, different experiences, whether it's PWRs, whether it's BWRs, and so on. There could be an opportunity where different countries or different continents can exploit that workforce that currently right now, is available to support the nuclear power industry. So Germany, large population, large expertise in nuclear power, excellent workforce, engineering mindset. There could be opportunities for African countries to go lead on some of that experience, the regulatory experience, the actual technical experience, and so on, to help them move faster into nuclear power. So that is a big opportunity for African countries as they move past the licensing, regulatory, into construction and operating nuclear plants. At the end of the day, plants have to be operated. Who's going to operate the plants? What training is required? Is there expertise that's available, and so on? I see a country like Germany supplying a number of resources to help a lot of smaller countries get started with their programs, from regulations to operations to maintenance and so on. So that's a big opportunity that I see.
That's an interesting point to tap on. the expertise that is already there. For example, in countries like Germany, that's phase out from nuclear,
Correct.
but those expertise are still there. So those experts can help other countries in Africa and around the world. And also, you
Exactly.
mentioned financing. Financing is a big issue, but as you said, now with the surge of AI, and also with the multilateral banks are more lenient toward nuclear, like the World Bank, etc. So hopefully that would
Correct.
give a boost to financing.
Exactly. Exactly. Very good point, Ibrahim. Very good point.
Thanks. And my final question, how important is early engagement between industry experts and regulators during program development?
Yes, that is probably one of the best questions. Early engagement is key. You have to engage early in order to be successful. I a lot of people tell me that I happen to wake up early, and I'm an early riser, and I do that because early engagement is what gets me ahead before the day really starts. When you have different challenges, when you have different interruptions, you have different needs. So I wake up early because that's when I do my best work. Early engagement is when I believe that countries, regulatory bodies, vendors, and so on can do their best work. Engage early, focus on the critical needs, and start now. Whether it's engaging in established nuclear regulatory bodies, countries operating plants, and so on, like the U.S., the U.K., France, previously obviously Germany, Canada. Early engagement is key because it gets you ahead. Um, the regulatory bodies, in my opinion, are often being built in parallel with the projects themselves for constructing plants. When you look at a country like Africa, so that's a double whammy. You have two critical things that are happening in parallel. So there has to be some early engagement, there has to be some focused training, and there has to be the utilize of experience and expertise to make sure that as you're doing those parallel activities of regulating the plants as well as constructing and operating the plants, you can do it safely and with quality. So early engagement and training is really key, and that can shave off years from the deployment timeline for nuclear power plants. So it's absolutely critical. Technical upskilling, and I keep talking about training. That's key as well. When regulators sit across from industry experts to discuss different regulatory approaches, nuances, the vendor's technology, and so on, that serves as a high level on the job training for the regulators and anyone involved in that in those discussions. So early engagement is key. Even if the construction timeline for a plan has not been set, engage early, foundational training, and so on would definitely help the different countries and the different regulatory bodies to really gain that expertise before they get into construction and operations of the plant. So engage now, train now, find resources now. That's my motto.
Indeed, indeed. Thank you very much, Shay, for sharing your uniquely practical perspective on what it truly takes to move nuclear programs from policy ambition to operational reality. Nuclear success
Absolutely.
in Africa will depend not only on technology and financing, but on strong institutions, skilled local professionals, as you mentioned, training is very important, and early transparent collaboration between regulators and the industry. In conclusion, I'm delighted to share that Sonix is a silver sponsor at the fifth edition of the Africa Nuclear Business Platform, which will be held in Abuja, Nigeria from the 21st to the 23rd of April 2026. AFNBP 2026 aim to position Africa as a major player in the global nuclear renaissance, coming at a pivotal moment for advancing Africa's nuclear energy ambitions and fostering meaningful international collaboration across the continent. Stay tuned for the next episode of MVP Hot Seats. Thank you very much, Shay.
Yes. Thank you very much, Ibrahim. This was a great discussion. I look forward to being in person and meeting everyone and discussing the needs of the African nuclear program and how we can all support getting to the next stage. Thank you.
And likewise, looking forward to seeing you in Abuja.